Okay. Could you start with your name, the year you graduated Pingree, and what you're doing now?
Sure. My name's David Baird. I graduated Pingree in 1992, and I'm currently in the U.S. Navy. I'm a commander in the U.S. Navy. My job in the Navy is primarily as an F-18 fighter pilot. But right now I'm not flying. I'm working in the Pentagon on the staff of the Office of the Secretary of Defense.
Okay, great. Can you describe your Pingree years, when you came, and then maybe some of the interesting things that you saw throughout your years here?
Sure. I started Pingree in seventh grade, so that would have been, I guess, 1986, the fall of 1986. Uh, and continued all through middle school and through
Mm-hmm.
high school at the campus there in Basking Ridge. Um, it was a transformative time for me. I think high school is for everybody, but certainly it shaped me in a large measure uh, to be shape my future.
Mm-hmm.
Academically, it was, of course, challenging. I think I learned after Pingree, I went to the U.S. Naval Academy for college. I certainly learned there that Pingree prepares you really well for college, particularly in terms of how to think and how to write and how to
Mm-hmm.
express your thoughts. I found that I was far more prepared than many of my classmates in how to form a coherent thought, maybe even an original thought,
Mm-hmm.
and then express that with with proper format and proper backup and factual evidence, um, and also express it concisely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also played three sports while I was there. I played soccer, wrestling, and lacrosse. And I think the team aspect of both of all three sports um, shaped my ability to work as a team, work within a team, find find one's own role within a team, and then also the sort of the individual aspects in addition to the team aspects of wrestling really shaped my self confidence and just sort of, I guess, grit maybe is the current word that
Mm-hmm.
people use of just being able to gut through something and and rely upon yourself when you need to. Um, Also took part in the music program, played trombone and multiple
Yes.
different bands and orchestras and ensembles and whatnot. So it was a broadening experience going through Pingree. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's difficult not to get engaged in a lot of different
Right.
activities and things, and I found that to be really both enjoyable, but also really helpful to develop and to grow as a person.
Mm-hmm. Could you just? Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Could you describe what the honor code was like in your Pingree years? I've heard a lot of things between it changing and the dynamic that changed over the years, especially with Mr. John Hanley at the helm as
Right.
headmaster.
Yeah. So Mr. Hanley took over as headmaster. It was either during my eighth grade or ninth grade year. I can't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he's certainly a memorable person, and he definitely brought his own touch to Pingree, and I think that was very helpful. Um, so the honor code for me, particularly given after leaving Pingree and moving into a career in military service, um, the honor code definitely was a bedrock for my future military service. When at the time, the honor code at Pingree was, eh, I'd say initially it was mostly just the plaque on the wall, and then something that you signed for every major paper that you turned in or test
Mm-hmm.
that you took. But over time, it developed into much more than that, more of a cultural piece of Pingree. Sort of the cultural foundation of Pingree, I'd actually say, in that it just taught you the meaning of integrity, the value of integrity, and the value of being an honorable person, a person that can be counted on, a person that can be counted on to be truthful and honest and forthright. And it also helped to teach young men and women how to confront those who are not being honorable. And I think that's really one of the hardest things to do at any stage of life, but particularly as a young man or woman to confront a friend who maybe is making a bad decision or is making a bad choice and is sacrificing their integrity. But yeah, I mean, I think it started initially, in early years, you learn to sign the honor pledge from, most of your homework assignments, if not all of your homework assignments, sign the honor pledge on all your tests and exams and so forth. And what starts as just okay, I promise I didn't cheat, eventually turns into, I'm an honest person and you can rely on me, that this is my honest work, and this is also, my word, which is a very important thing to preserve.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe maybe any specific experiences you've had with the honor code, or any interactions with your friends or faculty that have given you a really clear, defined idea of what you believe in the honor code?
Yeah, let me think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's been a little while, so I don't remember distinct experiences at Pingree that related to the honor code.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember one at the Naval Academy that really just involved a person lying about where they were at a certain point in time, and they were basically doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, and lied to try and cover it up, and were caught. And I served on the honor board for that. And what I remember about that is just, clearly the person was lying. Clearly it was to try and prevent embarrassment about something that person shouldn't have been doing. And instead of weathering that short-term embarrassment, this person chose to lie and sacrifice their integrity, which resulted in this person being expelled from the Naval Academy, and therefore having to change career plans and college plans, et cetera, et cetera. But it gave me a lot of perspective on how powerful fear of embarrassment can be, and how firm you have to stand on your desire to maintain your integrity, desire to maintain your word and your honor, to fight those feelings of fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, that sort of thing. I think in a lot of ways, I'd say the faculty at Pingree that helped shape my ability to fight that fear of failure and fight that fear of embarrassment most were my coaches. Because in athletics, no matter what, everybody fails. That's part of the deal. There's been a few undefeated teams at Pingree, I'm sure, but within those teams, I'm sure there have been points of failure throughout the season, whether it just be a specific play or a tryout or practice or something. and I think you have to embrace failure and not necessarily accept it, but embrace that it's going to happen, and you're going to have to take every opportunity to learn from those failures and move on from them. So I think, in fact, I remember my wrestling coach during most of my time at Pingree, in particular during my freshman year, was Coach Fort, who's still there in the PE department. He's still coaching golf, as far as I know. Anyhow, I had a tryout, or what we call wrestle off, to make the varsity team, and I lost. And I'm not sure if Coach Fort was surprised, but I was certainly disappointed and surprised that I lost. And I went to talk to him afterwards, and he said, you looked, he asked if I was nervous. And I said, yeah, I'm not sure if I was nervous or just tentative. He's like, but I was definitely anxious. He's like, and he said, it's okay to be anxious. Being anxious is good because being anxious means you want to succeed. But you should try not to be nervous, because being nervous means you're just scared of failing, and it's okay to fail. Being anxious means you accept the fact that you might fail, but you're anxious to succeed. Being nervous means you're scared of failing, and that's not something to ever be scared about. And I remember that to this day. That was my freshman year, which is pretty neat. So I think that, in a weird way, that ties into the honor code. Maintaining your honor, maintaining your integrity, just means, many times means you're more willing to fail than you are to sacrifice your integrity.
Can you describe what it was like being on the honor board at the Naval Academy?
Sure. I mean, so the mechanics of it are, it's sort of like a jury of your peers. So first off, if someone is accused of an honor violation at the Naval Academy, it goes through, at first a sort of an administrative process to make sure that it's all done properly, and the statements are filled out and that sort of thing. And then if it's deemed to be serious enough that it needs to go in front of an honor board, which is not a very high bar to clear. I mean, essentially any reasonably suspected honor violation goes in front of an honor board of your peers. You're notified that you're being asked to serve on an honor board, and you don't know who you're going to serve. Who the accused is, I guess. So you're essentially a member of the board, which is, for lack of a better term, sort of the jury. And it's got a lot of similarities to sort of a trial. The accused honor violator is given an opportunity to speak. Well, first off, the accuser speaks about what they saw, what they experienced, what they know about the situation. The accused is allowed to bring character representatives and present mitigating facts or present exculpatory facts. And then once that's all said and done, the honor board deliberates, and the deliberation is, of course, conducted in secret or in private, and it's not to be discussed afterwards. But it's a serious thing, and it's done in a specific room that's very private, and also sort of it's a stately type room where you realize that this is something serious that's going on. This is not, you're not doing it on folding chairs. It's a big table. It's a formal process. It's very serious. Notes are taken, but it's all done by students, or what at the Naval Academy they're called midshipmen. I don't believe there are any sort of adults there. In other words, there might be one faculty member there that is not supposed to speak, but is there to observe the process and then consult if something is going, really the wrong way. Lawyers, in particular, are not allowed in the honor board. Accused midshipmen are allowed to consult with a lawyer and have one outside, but they're not allowed in the room because it's not a legal process. It's an honor board process. Even though it matches a lot of sort of the same feel as a legal process, it's not. The decision of the honor board whether or not to find someone guilty of an honor violation is obviously a heavy decision. That said, the honor board doesn't have the authority to actually expel anybody or they call it dismiss them from the Naval Academy. Only the superintendent, who's an admiral, can do that. However, the honor board is allowed to make a recommendation as to whether or not the accused midshipman should be dismissed or whether should be allowed, retained and worked with. And that's essentially a question of, how serious was the violation? Did the accused ever sort of come clean and say, "Yep, I made a huge mistake, and here I am." So that has a lot to do with that, as to whether or not you're retained or whether or not you're sent home. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you describe how the ideas of honor and morals have shaped your life through Pingree, through the Naval Academy, your service afterwards, and even today?
Yeah. So you said honor and morality. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's a core value. Both those words are core values that go to the heart of everything that one does, and how you process difficult decisions, how you process easy decisions, how you make choices in every aspect of your life. At the Naval Academy, they talk a lot about honor, but the word that they really drive home, and I've probably caught on because they've used it a lot, is integrity. And the way they taught us the meaning of integrity is, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, or doing the right thing even when other people aren't looking. And I think, both of those descriptions are apt and is a great way to see people, a great way to try and remember what's truly important. I think lots of people have seen others do the right thing when everybody's watching, and then you see them behind closed doors or off on their own, and you realize that, that was for show. That was because they knew people were watching, and look at what they're doing now. And I think that is so quickly seen through, or it's so it's so easy to see through that fakeness, and realize that that's not really a person of integrity. That's not really an honorable person. Now, that's not to say that any of us are perfect, and it's nobody. A person of honor can't make a mistake or do something that they wish they hadn't after they think about it or something like that. But that's different than saying, hey, you know what, everyone's watching me right now. I'm going to be really, really nice to this person. And then once everybody leaves, I'm going to say some awful things about them behind their back. That's not a person of honor or a person of integrity. In an academic setting, hey, during a exam you take in class, yeah, I'm not going to, stare over at the person's paper next to me. But then, if I'm writing a paper at home, I'm going to, really pull a lot of stuff off the internet and just change a few words enough to get it through the plagiarism checkers, and but call it my own thought. That's not a person of integrity or honor either. And then, so the other word you used was morality, and I think that's a harder question, because that can sometimes get more into personal beliefs, or it starts to get into a harder area, because honor and truthfulness and integrity, I think, can be a lot more agreed upon, and morality sometimes gets a little bit squishier in really complex problems. And particularly in the military, that can be a difficult thing. Part of the job of the military is to sometimes take other human beings' lives, and there are some big moral questions that are attendant to that. And without getting too deep into all that, that's something that that we weigh in the military quite heavily, and something that each person has to kind of sort out, particularly those that are actually involved in direct conflict. But at the end of the day, one's own morals, and really the morals of I guess maybe common morals, are what carry you through, and you realize that a portion of morality is protecting the lives of others through it's sometimes okay to take another person's life if you view it as moral, in that you're protecting the lives of others, or protecting future conflict, or preventing future conflict, I should say. That was kind of a rambling answer, but I think that's how those words have affected me. Is morality is a tough thing in certain aspects of life in the military. But if you maintain your honor and your integrity, and look at and have serious discussions with yourself about your own morals, and how you can satisfy those in very difficult situations in the military, then you're okay. But you need to have a firm foundation in integrity and honor and morality, in order to be able to have those really difficult thoughts and difficult conversations with yourself or with others, when you're put in tough situations.
Can you describe any part of the pillars or some of the principles that guide your moral compass?
So I guess the big one for me would be, it all goes towards what is the greater good. Do whatever is for the greater good of our country, our my family, the planet. That's probably comes first. Greater good for humanity, greater good for our country, greater good for my family, and that's probably what is the pillar. What is the greater good? And I think that's fundamental to any conversation about morality. Is is that what morality is? Is it all about the greater good, or is it about more situational? Is it more which person is a greater good when it comes down to it? And I think that's more difficult. But if you look at what you believe is the greater good for humanity, for our country, for my family, that keeps me fairly straight.
Do you have any major lessons that you learned during your service that you think others can take away from?
In terms of, honor and morality, or just in terms of anything?
Honor and morality, anything really.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess some of the best would be, invest in and value your individual relationships with the people around you. So, I've had the opportunity to serve in a bunch of different squadrons, different fighter squadrons with great people of all different backgrounds, all different, just all different backgrounds, and they all have different jobs within a squadron, whether it be fixing airplanes, flying airplanes, doing paperwork, doing, IT stuff, personnel stuff, you name it, medical professionals, that sort of thing, we have lots of different types of jobs within a squadron. And each one of those people is unique, and each one of them has unique attributes that I drew from, that I learned from. And I think when you invest in those relationships by doing common things like listening when you're having a conversation with them, like remembering, who they are and what's important to them, so that you can, back them up or be there for them if they go through a tough time, is really important, because at some point each one of us will go through a tough time, and having those relationships and valuing those relationships will be sort of the bedrock that gets you through challenging situations. And then, so that would be one, invest in and value the relationships with everybody around you, no matter how big or how small how big or how small the person is, really. I mean, both in terms of their job and in terms of their experience and in terms of their background, you're going to learn something from everybody.
Right.
The other thing that I would say is, try and set your goals as early as you can. I was really lucky in that I kind of knew what I wanted to do early on. Sometime, I don't know, between 6th, 7th, 8th grade is when I decided that, hey, I think I want to go to the Naval Academy and I want to fly airplane off aircraft carriers. And, that was, over 30 years ago. And I've kind of been able to keep doing that for a long time now. So if you're able to set your goals early on and find your passion early on, that's a win. And pursue that and make it happen. Figure out what you need to do and come up with a plan and do everything that you can to execute that plan. If you're not able to, that's okay too. And some people who I see now are having, the best times in their careers are ones who figured it out just recently.
Right.
But and that's really exciting to see them all of a sudden be like, hey, wow, look at this. He found his or her place in the world and found what brings them joy and brings them, what they're passionate about. And that's ultimately what brings happiness, and ultimately what gives you the confidence and comfort to do what's right and to easily be able to live a life of honor and integrity is when you're doing something that you're passionate about. I think, you know, it's fairly, it's much easier to make hard decisions or put yourself in challenging situations when you're doing something that you love and doing something that you're passionate about. If it's something that you're just sort of ambivalent about, you're going to have a harder time making those good choices when they're tough choices to make. So, to the extent that one can find their passion as early as possible, do it. And if you find yourself doing something you're not passionate about, it may be worth consideration of moving on to something else.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I think for most of the people listening too, I'm sure it'll make sense.
Yeah.
Can you describe your work life currently? I believe you're working in DC down at the Pentagon.
Yep, I sure am. I'm calling you from inside the one of the many rings of the Pentagon. It's a very different work life than what I experienced while I was flying airplanes, in the fleet,
Right.
Out at sea. It in some ways it couldn't be more different. It's cubicle farms of people trying to do the right thing, doing all the bureaucratic functions of government and of administering to the military. So whereas in the fleet, the relationships I had were with people who were working in dangerous environments with, that involved uncomfortable conditions and situations and really challenging work. Here it's a wholly different environment. It's not dangerous any more so than working anywhere else is. It's not particularly uncomfortable. You're working in an air-conditioned office at a desk, but it's still important and valuable work. And the thing that I'm happy to have seen is that there's still people who are equally passionate about their jobs here as there are really anywhere else. And so, there's a lot of bureaucracy that has to happen given the size of the Department of Defense budget, given the size of the number of people that are in the Department of Defense, that are in the military. There's a lot of work to get done just to administer to them, to make sure that our peers that are out, all over the world, working hard to protect American interests and to be ready to respond in the case of a crisis. To make sure that they have everything they need and they're provided for, and they have everything both materially that they need, have the guidance and the authority that they need. There's a lot to that, and it's not necessarily glamorous work, but it's important work, and it's sometimes easy, sometimes challenging. So, it's certainly, like I said, it couldn't be a more different environment than what I came from for many years, out, in the fleet. It's still, for the most part, a rewarding place to work, because ultimately it's contributing to an important mission. I think that the harder part about working in a big bureaucracy like this is it's much harder to identify sort of the tangible things that you've done or you've contributed to. So you find yourself sometimes feeling like just a cog in the machine, or just you're on the hamster wheel, running around and running, but not sure that you're ever actually getting anywhere or accomplishing anything of meaning. In reality, there are things that we're accomplishing that are meaningful, even if we don't see them or can't touch them every day. And I think that's a common feeling for a lot of people, particularly those that work in large organizations and those that work in sort of the depths of large office buildings in a large organization. It's really hard to be able to touch something and say I did that, or I helped do that, and that in a lot of ways was one of the best parts of being out in the fleet and flying every day and traveling all over the world is you got to see, yep, I just flew that mission, or I just, executed that training scenario really, really well, and we're better prepared for it, or I taught another person how to do a new mission or a new role or a new tactic or something like that. You can, when you're training people, when you're training yourself, when you're doing things like that, you can see improvement, you can see development quickly. When you're processing bureaucratic paperwork or scheduling meetings where it's unclear whether decisions are actually getting made or not, that's a much harder thing to say, look at what I accomplished today or this week or this month or this year. So it's definitely something I still struggle with is how do you find meaning in a organization like where I am now?
Right.
And I'm not sure that I have the best answers for people out there, but I think it's, you just have to try and occasionally pick your head up and look at the big picture and zoom out to the 30,000 foot level and see how all of this fits into a bigger process or a bigger goal.
Right. Do you have any moments that have kind of helped you realize the sense of, I guess, rewarding in your work right now at the Pentagon?
Yeah, some small things from, so one of, where I work in the Pentagon is all about acquisitions. And, so it's buying the new equipment for service members to use, and in particular for naval aviation to use, is what I'm specializing on. So it's new weapon systems, new flight equipment, new airplanes, new parts and supplies and everything. And when it's a new system that brings added capability or added protection to my friends out in the fleet, that when it finally gets through all the processes and gets into production and eventually gets to the fleet where those guys can actually touch it and use it and it's something real at that point, that's the ultimate satisfaction. And I've only been here in the Pentagon for, I guess, 2.5 years, so it's hard to say something that there certainly isn't anything that I've seen from start to finish, because our acquisition system takes significantly longer than that, and in particular with things that get attached to airplanes that go pretty high speed. It takes a long time to develop them and test them and make sure that they're going to do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
But I've seen things that other people started and were nearing completion when I got here. I've seen them actually get through to completion, and now my friends in the fleet are using them and have more capability than I had when I was flying. So that's ultimately the valuable part. It just takes a really long time and takes multiple different people working on things to get it there. But there's things that have there are some things that were sort of glimmers in people's eyes when I got here that now are more than that, and actually have people actively working on them, and eventually they will get to the fleet. It'll be many years, but we know that they're on their way. So that's satisfying to see. One of the big roles of the Pentagon is to come up with the Department of Defense budget and budgets for each, and how that then gets divided into each individual service. And that's there's a lot of parochial battles that go on there, or parochial arguments that happen trying to fight for the programs that you think are the most important. and make sure that they get funding, particularly over the past several years when funding was has been very, very constrained for good reason. So occasionally winning one of those discussions, or winning's not the right word, but days when you realize that the argument that you made carried the day and got the result that you wanted in terms of budget decisions and allocation. That can be very satisfying in an obscure way. Again, it's something hard to touch, something hard to put your finger on and say, "Yep, I did that." The paper that I wrote or the discussion that I had made sure that X amount of money was provided for a given system or a given program. Very difficult to trace that directly, but at the end of the day, if you walk out of a meeting or if you submit a paper that is the best argument that you can make in support of something or maybe against something, then at least you've played your role in that part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Commander Baird, I'm just about done with all of my questions.
Okay.
I was wondering if you have any last words, maybe about Pingree or your experiences in the academy service, or your work now for anyone listening.
We met on that career day, and that was the first time I had been back to Pingree in a decent amount of time.
Right.
But what I will say is, just how familiar it was. Not only because the structure is still there and in large part the same, but I was really, struck by how many of the faculty members that were there when I was a student are still there now, 25, 30 years later. And it shows just how committed people are to that community and to that place. How much value we place in the faculty at Pingree, because they really are spectacular, and they've shaped every single one of us that's gone through there. And I think they recognize that. I hope they recognize that, and remember that, because it's a special place that has developed some remarkable people, and it's a privilege to experience that. So I just say, cherish every moment at Pingree, and then don't be like me and come back once every dozen years. Go back often and touch. Pingree's sort of a touchstone that everyone should try and go back to as often as possible, if not actually, physically. The Pingree experience is still a touchstone that you can go back to intellectually and I guess emotionally often to remember where that foundation that they've set for everybody.
Right.
So that would be my wrap up.
All right. Great. Commander David S. Baird, class of 1992 at Pingree. Commander Baird, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Sean, I really appreciate the opportunity. I wish you the best of luck. How many more days till graduation? When you got a couple of weeks?
About a week and a half.
Nice. Well, I wish you the best of luck, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you. All right. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sean. You too.